Airing on Asheville FM 103.3 LPFM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcasts and podcast emanating out of occupied Chalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world, and you can find our archives, transcripts, ways to follow us and support us at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org. This week, we're joined by Francesca, a member of Prisoners For Palestine, who is a former prisoner herself, speaking about Palestine Action, a group proscribed in the UK as a terrorist organization at the behest of the Israeli state and the Israeli arms manufacturer Elbit Systems for their successful direct actions against Elbits' war profiteering and the UK's role in assisting the genocide in Gaza. Currently, 6 incarcerated members of Prisoners For Palestine are on an open-ended hunger strike against the conditions of their confinement and the continued operation of Elbit, which has garnered support from around the world, including solidarity strikes by Stecco in San Remo prison in Italy and Dimitris Hatzivassilidis in Domokos prison in Greece. The hunger strikers at this point are Keser Zura, Amu Gib, Heba Moraisi, John Sink, T. Hoja, and Cameron Ahmed. This last week, the UK government has begun its trial against the 29 Palestine Actionists, simultaneously to the legal challenge to that proscription being brought before the courts. You can keep up on the hunger strikes at prisonersforpalestine.org or their various social media, as well as many of the other cases at filtonactionists.com. Check the show notes for more links.
My name's Francesca. I'm a spokesperson for Prisoners For Palestine, pronouns she, her. I'm over here in England. We like to say UK because it makes us sound less racist, but that's not the case, unfortunately, for a lot of people here. So I was in prison for 9 months. Until March this year, held on remand. So what that means is you're held before your trial because apparently you're a danger to the public or something like that. Unfortunately, it's something that's being used in a very indiscriminate way over here just to keep more and more people in prison. I think we're following a very similar model, unfortunately, to what you guys have over there, which is to keep as many people as possible in prison for no reason at all. I was imprisoned as a result of a Palestine action. That was my local arms factory just down the road from me here that makes components for fighter jets and missiles that get sent to Israel. And there's a lot of them being made over here. So while I was in prison, I started writing letters to all the other people that were locked up as a result of alleged direct action. And just to explain a little bit, I don't know if you have the same concept over there. The term is meant to explain this idea of, instead of just asking the state or the powers that be to do something on our behalf, we go out and do it for ourselves. So obviously there's a very long history of people doing this in many different places, in many different times. It's just that we have this particular term for it right now, which often involves going to these arms factories and causing as much damage as possible and stopping the production of these deadly weapons. So yes, I started writing letters to a lot of the other people that were in prison all around the country. And we formed a bond, which is a bond that I think comes from the particular situation that we're all in. We're all in the same boat. We're suffering from the same kind of repression. So that's quite a unique relationship, I think. I was the only political activist who was in my prison. And so I tried to carry out acts of individual resistance, which obviously is very empowering, but very limited. So when I got out of prison, I had heard similar kinds of feelings from the other people that were still in there. And of course, to make this more powerful, it has to be collective action. So I decided to help them by helping them to organize across different prisons. And the result of this now is what's happening, the collective hunger strike. So 6 people in prisons around England on hunger strike at the same time with the same demands within the same campaign. It's the 4th week now of the hunger strike. None of the demands have been met, but there's a huge campaign around them, both nationally and internationally. And the pressure is building on the British state to get these demands met. So I can tell you about the demands. I'm sure people would want to hear about this. So I think they're all very reasonable demands that any so-called democracy, which I'm sure we can all agree we don't really live in that, it would automatically give to its citizens. So the first one, and this is a very simple thing for the prisons themselves to give to the people on hunger strike, but they've chosen not to, is no censorship. So we've seen consistently over the whole time that the hunger strikers have been in prison, and their comrades as well, there's been a very high level of censorship with the justification, the excuse of security reasons. So because they're seen as labelled by the state as terrorists, they have this excuse of blocking their letters, their phone calls, their visits, their political statements, their general contact with the outside world in a much harsher way than would happen with any other kinds of prisoner. So once you express any kind of political opinion, or if you're in prison for political reasons, then this is what happens. Obviously, prison isolates everybody from the outside world. That's the whole purpose of it. But this is a more particular kind of repression that's happening. So we have to fight to get books sent to them, to get letters to them. A lot of the time, we don't even know if they've been received or not. What I can say is there's already been a couple of wins on this front. 2 of the prisoners that aren't actually on hunger strike, but they are comrades of the people on hunger strike, have gotten a massive pile of post of mail that's been withheld from them for months now. So we can see some kind of reaction from the prison administration on that front. The second demand is bail, immediate bail for everyone. So not just the people on hunger strike, but all their comrades as well, because we understand that, of course, not everybody can take part in a hunger strike, but they will not be divided from their comrades. They are doing it on everybody's behalf. As I said, none of the people that are in prison as a result of this political witch hunt meet the threshold for being held before trial. Apart from that, the legal limit for this in this country is 6 months. Some of them have been in prison for over a year now, and they don't even know when they will receive their sentence. They might not even be found guilty, and they won't get any apology or compensation or anything of the kind if that happens. Their lives are just being ruined for no reason at all. These are young people mostly who they haven't been able to continue their studies at university. They've lost their jobs or their houses. They aren't able to look after their family members. Some of them are sole carers for family members, and they should be able to prepare for their trial out in the community on bail, which is, the usual thing to happen. Number 3 is the right to a fair trial. So again, something that a supposed democracy should do automatically, right? But we know that's not the case, because it is the same people in power that are profiting from arms sales that make these laws. It's the same judges that make the decisions in court that are in the pocket of these people in power. We don't really have an independent judiciary. Anyone who's been before a court will tell you that as common sense. So there's been a lot of slander in the media by journalists, but also by government ministers about the people in prison and about the organisation, Palestine Action, to prejudice the trial. So people already have these ideas in their head that they're violent, that they're extremists, that they're funded by Iran. None of this has any basis in facts, but because it's been in the mainstream media now, and, it's quite possible that some people on the jury in the trials have seen some of this, they won't be impartial before they go into that court. As well as that, very important to talk about the fact that there's a lot of documents that we've seen parts of. They're heavily redacted, but they've been released thanks to lawyers lobbying the government. Documents like emails, like meeting minutes that show that the British government has been meeting with Israeli government officials, with different state actors like the Attorney General, like counter-terror police, and the CEO of Elbit Systems. So Elbit Systems is this Israeli-owned weapons company that operates in the UK as well. It has various factories over here that make drones that are sent over to Israel to murder Palestinian people. And we've had lots of reports from the people in Palestine about how these are used to massacre the people there. And when the action took place in Filton, so the reason Filton 24 are called the Filton 24 is because they allegedly went to this factory in the town of Filton, which is in the south of England, and found all these drones that were packaged up, ready to go to be exported to Israel. So we can see all these meetings going on behind the scenes, and there's certain things that they say in these documents that Elbit Systems is encouraging the government to put these people in prison without trial, that they're encouraging the government to come down very hard on these because it'll affect their business. So all these kinds of things, not all the documents have been released. So how can they have a fair trial if they don't have all that information? They also don't have all the information about the arms exports by Elbit Systems from this country to Israel, which is obviously relevant to their case as well. So that's the third demand. Number 4 and very relevant to what's happening right now, the wider context, which I can talk a little bit more about later on, is deprescribed. So first of all, I have to explain the word, right? So in this country, there's a process whereby we don't have a constitution like in the USA, right? Which actually protects the right to freedom of expression. And that's being impinged upon in a very, very serious way, more and more as time goes on. So to prescribe an organization, that means to designate it as a terrorist organization. And that means under law that expressing support for a proscribed or a terrorist organization is illegal, and you can be prosecuted and sent to prison for that. So I can give the example of Hamas. Hamas was prescribed as a terrorist organization, and now anyone who says something positive about them can be prosecuted. And this has been happening a lot in the last couple of years during this genocide, that people are being arrested, harassed, sent to court as a result of doing speeches or chants at protests. Even just the word resistance. Like, we have a comrade in London who's a student who's now being prosecuted for using the word resistance in a speech. So this is just one example of how the pro-Palestine movement is being repressed. But this is, the people in prison right now are on the sharp end of this, obviously, because they were accused of terrorism before the organization Palestine Action was designated as a terrorist organization. That happened in July of this year. But at that point, some of our comrades had already been in prison for almost a year. So we can see this gradual creeping effect that is being orchestrated by the government at the behest of these companies and of the Israel lobby. So to deprescribe Palestine Action as a terrorist organization would obviously have implications for the people in prison right now, because it would just stop the government using this as a justification to charge them under terrorism legislation as well. So you can see it's all linked together. We also demand an apology from the Home Secretary, who's called Yvette Cooper, an apology for everything that she said, because it was her that was responsible for this change of the law, for this act of calling all of us terrorists. So a result of this now is, beyond the people that are in prison, who are, as our comrade T put it, who's on hunger strike right now, they're the punching bags of this prescription. All of us have had these periods of time where we are going to bed at night and thinking, are they going to come for us next? They could burst into our houses with guns at any point in time and drag us off, kidnap us, accuse us of terrorism, and not allow us any contact with the outside world. That's what happened to the people that got arrested. They weren't allowed any contact with the outside world for a week, interrogated day and night by terrorism police. So I think it's quite similar to what's happening with ICE over there in the USA, actually. The people just being snatched off the streets, right, or from their houses. Demand number 5, and I think this is the most important demand for everybody that's on hunger strike, and they will say it over and over to us to make sure we don't forget. Number 5, and this is directed to the general public, not really at the British state. This is to shut Elbit down. So these actions that have been taking place over the last few years by Palestine Action to shut down these arms factories, specifically Elbit Systems, was very effective. There's already 4 sites in this country that were shut down as a result of these actions over the last 5 years. And it was clear that would continue to happen if these actions were allowed to continue. That's why the whole organization got banned effectively. So the people in prison say to us, we can't do anything now about this. We're locked up in a tiny prison cell. All we can do is a hunger strike. That's all that's left to us. But you're still out there. You can still do it. Take action on our behalf. Continue our legacy. Keep taking action at these factories. Get them all shut down. That is the most important demand.
Great. Thank you for breaking those down. As I understand, the hunger strike that's been declared is an indefinite hunger strike, right? So it's not like it'll go until a certain period of time has passed. This means that there's a very high likelihood, and as I understand, there's already been signs of people having faltering health or like increased health issues related to it. I guess before we get deeper into the story of the Filton Action and Elbit and such, could you talk a little bit about the condition of the folks that are on hunger strike right now?
Yeah, of course. So the hunger strike started on the 2nd of November. That's the commemoration of Balfour Day, which I'm sure you'll ask me about later, actually. It was very important to start it on that date specifically because of where we are and the role this country has played in the colonization of Palestine from the very beginning. So that means now we're in the 4th week of the hunger strike. So, of course, 4 weeks without taking any calories is a very, very long time. And people's health has deteriorated quite seriously. Yes, now everybody's quite weak, dizzy. They can't sleep. They can't stand up for a long time. They can't concentrate. Their memory is deteriorated very seriously. There's already been one person hospitalized just a few days ago. That's Cameron. He's now, yes, he's been in a hospital for 3 days now, I think. He's still not been allowed a phone call to either his family or his lawyer. So again, the prison not following its own regulations. So we don't know how he is or anything like that. But obviously the fact that he's in hospital means he's in quite a serious health situation. And I have to say that the important thing that we want people to know is one thing that actually improves their health, that gives them physical strength to keep going, is all the solidarity that they receive from around the world. And they've had an incredible amount of solidarity. We've had messages from everywhere, from Palestine to New Zealand, to the USA, to the Philippines, and everywhere in between. And every time they get one of those messages, they start to feel a little bit physically better. Same as when we did demos outside 7 different prisons on the same weekend. And we got back the messages from all of them that all of a sudden they could stand up for a bit longer. They felt a bit stronger. So I think that's the important thing to remember. And they are so determined and so single-minded about this. The reasons and the method of hunger striking, that's why they're still going now.
Could you talk a little bit about what is Prisoners for Palestine? You mentioned that there's 6 prisoners that are on hunger strike, and you also mentioned Filton 24. Like, how do those relate? Are all of the 6 who are on hunger strike members of that, or are any of them Bryce Norton 5 prisoners? And I guess, what is the collective?
Yeah. So the Filton 24 campaign already existed for quite some time before Prisoners for Palestine started, because at that time, well, first of all, there was the Filton 6, and then it was the Filton 18, and then it was the Filton 24. So, the witch hunt continued for quite some time, to include many people that weren't even at the action on that day. So I don't know how they managed to find so many people to arrest for this action. And now it's the Filton 23. So something very interesting happened. One of our comrades, Sean, managed to get away. He got bail for a short period of time to attend a family wedding, which is very unusual, actually. I've never heard of that happening before. And now, as he put it in his own words, he refused to hand himself in to continue to be a prisoner of war for the Israeli state, which is effectively what's happened. He's just being sensible and taking liberty into his own hands. So that's, a continuation of the same way of thinking of direct action. We don't wait for anybody to give us what we need. We take it for ourselves. So he's out there somewhere. We don't know where. And we are wishing that that continues, that his liberty continues. So the people on hunger strike now, some of them are part of the Filton 24 or 23. 2 of them are from the Bryce Norton 5. So this was a different action, and this was an action that was directly afterwards. This was when the proscription of Palestine Action actually happened. So we can say it was the most immediate trigger of the prescription of the change in law. But it wasn't the reason. We know for a fact that the government was planning this for months and months. They were just waiting for the moment, and this was the perfect moment for them, because it was an action at an RAF base. So like the British...
Not the Red Army faction, but the Air Force.
I was just thinking of Top Gun for some reason.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, the British Air Force. This was an action in which some people allegedly broke into a Air Force base where there are lots of huge aircraft that are actually being used, and this came out not too long ago, they're being used as spy planes to fly over Gaza and send this information to Israel in real time. And that's happening on a daily basis. And so, of course, this was a huge controversy when it came out. The government tried to deny it, but then the evidence came out they couldn't deny it any longer. And so then there was this action at this airbase to put 2 of these aircraft out of service by spraying red paint into them. into the propellers. So after that, 5 people got arrested, and it was in the town of Bryce Norton. That's why it's called the Bryce Norton 5. And 2 of those people are now on hunger strike. That's Amu and John. So although they have kind of different names to them because they're different cases, they're all comrades, obviously, all alleged Palestine Action activists. And so they will stand together in this hunger strike, and they also stand together with all their comrades that are on trial at the moment.
Just to go back to the actual charges around the Filton case, right? I think you said there were 6 people initially that were arrested, and then they started expanding the net and getting more people in there. People had gone to an Elbit warehouse or factory in Filton and found drones that were being packaged and ready for export for use in Gaza or by Israel. You would think with charges of terrorism that they were accused of planting a bomb at the space or killing security guards or something like that. What are they actually accused of?
So it's very similar charges to my case and to everyone else that had taken action at these factories. They're related to property damage. And the problem is now, and this has been happening for over 20 years now, the British government has widened the definition of terrorism to a point that it means anything that they want it to mean. So terrorism has always been a term that has been used in a very racist manner, both here and in the USA. We can think back to 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq at that time. So anyone who is seen as a threat by the state in the sense that they dissent can be now labelled as a terrorist, and it's just been getting worse and worse from this period of time from the early 2000s. So yes, the government lawyers were actually arguing this week in the legal challenge against the proscription of Palestine Action that property damage is terrorism. So that's the point we're at now. And also as an extension of that, saying that you support someone who takes direct action, i.e. property damage, just saying that is also terrorism. So during this legal challenge this week, we had lots of people from a group called Defend Our Juries who sat outside the court with signs saying that they support this, and they all got arrested under terrorism charges. So they have now over 2,500 people that have been charged with this over the last couple of months. They've been doing a huge campaign of civil disobedience, which has really brought it to light to the general public how absurd this is and how far they've taken it in this authoritarian manner. So it's a chain effect, really, from the people that do the property damage to simply the people that support the property damage. More and more, they are criminalizing as many people as possible just because they disagree with their participation in the genocide in Gaza.
And the group Palestine Action has been brought up a few times, right? And that's who the proscription is technically against, and the banner that all these people are being threatened under. Can you talk about some of the history of Palestine Action, like when the group was founded, the sort of agreements or positions that the group takes, if it's hierarchical, if it's a network, like sort of how that works?
So Palestine Action started 5 years ago by 2 people. One of them, Huda, is actually Palestinian. So what they've done is taken inspiration from different groups of people that have done similar sorts of things. So I can talk about the Rayathon 9. That was 9 people in Ireland who decided to go and do something at their local arms factory. This was, it was a while back now. I don't remember the year, maybe 15 years ago. And they're actually coming out in support of us now, which is great. They broke into their local arms factory, caused lots of damage, occupied the place, and managed to get it shut down permanently. So seeing those kind of things and how effective they can be, that was where the idea germinated. And from then on, it just grew and grew, just from a couple of people. Now there's so many people who've taken action, and on many occasions, they've actually been acquitted in court because there is the legal defense. And the Prime Minister of this country, who is actually supposedly a human rights lawyer, has defended people in these kind of cases in the past and used the same legal defense, which is if you're acting to prevent a greater harm, then you're not guilty of property damage. So if I smash up a drone to stop that drone being used to murder people, then I'm not guilty of property damage. So this is, a lot of people have been acquitted in this sense. And of course, the government wouldn't accept that because it would affect the profits of their friends over at these arms companies. So that's how that kind of started, and it just snowballed from there. And the proscription actually has had a really counterproductive effect because nobody, only activists really knew about them before, and they went viral on social media because it was very impactful to see how they did the actions, how they occupy the roof with their red jumpsuits, with their fire extinguishers spraying those all over buildings. But with the prescription, with this legal nonsense that the government's currently doing, it's now become a household name. Now, any man on the street, any woman on the street, any person on the street knows who Palestine Action is. So it's been really effective in a very short space of time, actually. And I think the important principle of groups like this is that we can be autonomous. It is not complicated. Anyone can go out there and do something like this. You don't need a lot of resources or anything very complicated. It's just the motivation, the necessity of going out to do something physical with your hands to stop these arms exports, to stop the genocide, because we know that just talking about it or just going to a protest about it is not enough.
So you mentioned with the Irish case, Raytheon being the arms manufacturer in that instance, that people were protesting. Just of note, outside of Asheville, there is a subsidiary of Raytheon manufacturing plant called Pratt & Whitney, and there's a group that organizes locally protests about them called Reject Raytheon. But Elbit has been the company that's been brought up over and over again in this case. I guess, could you talk about Elbit Systems, its relationship to the government, some of its history, what it makes, and what kind of profits it sees?
So, yeah, I think what has to be understood is that Elbit is not just some kind of company that's making these things and makes their profit and kind of leaves it at that. They have a very, very close relationship with the British government and have had hundreds of millions of pounds of contracts with the British government for various different kinds of technology over the years. And the big thing that we need to talk about right now is that they were about to get a £2 billion contract with the British Army to actually train British soldiers, 60,000 British soldiers a year. So this was a kind of new low in these kind of relations, because it would become an intrinsic part of the British Army. So we can see these relationships coming closer and closer. And it's part of what people say about, what Elbit themselves say, that their weapons are battle tested on Palestinians. So later on, they can be exported around the world. It's clear to most people that, Palestine is a testing ground for all these horrific new weapons, like white phosphorus, for example, that's illegal under international law. Like now we can see exploding cell phones being sold during the supposed ceasefire, like the pages that exploded, all these kind of new technologies, AI being used, facial recognition being used, these drones that are quite new models that have these capabilities that we haven't seen before. All of this is really advancing this dystopian idea of a virtual war. Almost the soldiers don't have to go into the battlefield now. They just do it with a remote from the comfort of their own barracks or wherever they may be. Because when they do actually go into battle, they often lose. We've all heard these stories of them running scared from the fighters in Gaza, of them wearing nappies because they're so frightened that, they actually soil themselves. So they just sit in their barracks, they remote control these things, and it completely changes the face of modern war. And it's terrifying. And they're pushing this out now from Gaza to the rest of the world through these partnerships, not just with the British Army, but with lots of other countries as well. Just this week, there was a official diplomatic trip by representatives of armies from various different countries to Israel to, as they put it, learn lessons from this war. So this is why people are so passionate about fighting against what is happening in Palestine, not just for the Palestinian people, of course, but because there is this understanding that they'll do it to everybody else later. And that's what they're working on right now.
Okay, maybe could we talk, you mentioned Balfour Day as the initiation date for the hunger strike began, and to hear Zionists at least talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict or the settler colonialism that's been expanding, it would sound like it is a historic point of difference between, like, a religious conflict between two peoples that lasts as long as at least David and Goliath, right? But there are, like, historical points when you can point to when this conflict changed or when this conflict began. I wonder if you could talk a bit about the UK's role in the colonization of Palestine and its relationship to Israel up till today.
So, I think as we can see historically and currently with many other conflicts around the world, colonial conflicts, of course, is that religion is used as a weapon to divide and to oppress people. We can see that in the history of Ireland, for example, with the Catholics and the Protestants. But it's not the root cause of this. Absolutely not. So that's why, there's so many Christian Zionists as well. This is not really, when we come down to it, about religion. It's about colonialism. It's about power. It's about the exploitation of the people who have always lived on that land. So the British history there is key to understanding everything that's going on right now. So Palestine was British mandated Palestine before it became Israel. It was part of the British Empire for quite some time. And so because they felt that they were the owners of that land, just like they felt they were owners of half the planet at that time, they felt that they could gift that to some other people, the also historically oppressed Jewish people, who they were very conveniently trying to get out of Europe because of everything else that was going on there as well. So the Balfour Declaration was signed by Lord Balfour in 1917, I think it was. And this officially, for the first time in an official diplomatic document, it recognized the right of Israel to exist and gifting that land, the land of Palestine, to them. So obviously it had been discussed for, quite some time before that by these diplomats, colonial powers, but it was the first time that was enshrined in an official document. And that was the beginning of this process by which Israel came to exist, with the official backing of these colonial powers. And just from then right until now, we can see that Israel wouldn't be allowed to exist if it wasn't for the support of these colonial powers. So first of all, Britain, then of course USA, but European countries in general, who maybe to a more or less extent now trying to distance themselves from this, just for their own good publicity, because their citizens are against this. Of course, the USA is absolutely not distancing itself. Neither is Britain, because they continue with their arms exports. And so as a result of this, with our understanding of our history, that we are in the belly of the beast, as they say, it is our duty as the unwitting benefactors of colonialism to act against this oppression, this tyranny. So we are the best placed people to do it, right? If it's being made right here, then we're the ones to stop it. We're the ones to use our privilege, because the fact is, despite the fact that we may get locked up in prison, accused of terrorism, etc., we're still very privileged compared to the people in Palestine, the Palestinian prisoners, and lots of other people around the world who are victims of these colonial powers.
I want to touch on the other groups that were proscribed at the same time as Palestine Action, but I think because we're on a roll with talking about resistance to colonialism and supporting decolonial struggles, notably longtime human rights and social justice activist, Irish Republican and former MP Bernadette Devlin McAliskey put out a statement in support of the hunger strikes. Can you talk about the weight and legacy of hunger strikes in the UK as relates to anti-colonial activity and solidarity?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, very important for me to say, and this is part of our own political education as well, of decolonialising our language, that the north of Ireland should not be part of the UK. This was invented by the British state. They occupied Ireland. Ireland managed to win its independence, but not the entire island. So that is still a settler colonial project that hasn't been resolved despite the peace process. And there's still a lot of violence being enacted by the state over there, which people may know more or less about. So, I try to avoid using the term UK for that exact reason. And again, like when people talk about the biggest hunger strike in this country since 1981, right? Because that was the big famous hunger strike by the H Block men, IRA people. Bobby Sands most famously died during that. That wasn't actually in this country. That was in the north of Ireland. So situating ourselves in that political history is really important. And the people in Ireland have been incredibly supportive throughout this hunger strike. And there's been a very marked difference from what I can see in the kind of support, the level of support that they have offered to us compared to the people in Britain. And why that is, obviously, is because they remember their own history. and they keep that alive, and they understand the seriousness of a situation like this where people are taking a drastic last resort of going on hunger strike, and they will do everything they can to fight for those people because they've lived through that trauma themselves and they don't want it to happen to anyone else. So Bernadette's come out and shared a statement with us, which is absolutely beautiful. And when the prisoners heard about that, they were left them very touched as well. She'll continue to support us, of course, and she's always been an example for us in the political sense, never compromising on her radical beliefs. And I think that kind of support is what really gives our campaign life and gives it a political grounding, as well as all the other international solidarity.
I guess just to jump back to the proscription really quickly, I've seen it described in some articles that the Palestine Action being included in this was sort of snuck in alongside of two notorious, I guess, ethno-nationalist groupings that were also proscribed at the same time. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, so I don't actually remember the name of both of those groups. I just remember the Murder Maniacs Court because it's quite a striking name. And I don't actually know anything about them. I don't think anybody did really. It was very niche kind of information as far as I can see. But obviously the fact that they put this group alongside another group, I'm sure you can tell me better.
The Russian Imperial Movement is a ethno-nationalist, Russian chauvinist organization that's existed for a couple of decades in Russia and are very, anti-Roma, anti-Semitic, and such.
Yes. So what I can say about both of these groups is that they are in other countries, and this whole process of designating a political group as a terrorist organization has always happened with groups in other countries. And this is the first time that a domestic group, and especially a domestic protest group, has been included in this process. And obviously, putting that alongside these other two groups was a very sneaky tactic by the British government to make it almost impossible for MPs to veto that. And that's what happened. It was only thanks to our campaigning in the period coming up to that vote that some of the members of parliament actually voted against it. A lot of them weren't even aware of what was going on because obviously, Palestine Action was a grassroots organization. We never dealt with these people in power because it wasn't part of our strategy or tactics. So they didn't really know what was going on until it was too late. In fact, it came out later that quite a few of them felt that they'd been tricked into this when they were told about what was actually going on. But by then it was too late, obviously.
I want to say there have been some white nationalist groups in the UK that have been proscribed. And this is Burst from the Future. The group that I was thinking of is in fact National Action, proscribed in 2016 by the UK. But yeah, as you say, it's so it's putting Palestine Action in the orbit of Nazi groups. So there was an International Day of Action on Tuesday the 25th for the hunger strikers and their demands. I wonder how this went and how the UK government has been responding to the hunger strike.
So, yes, we call it an International Day of Action, but what we've been seeing in this campaign is that, of course, a hunger strike is a very fast-moving campaign. Things are changing all the time, and it's very organic. And we can see from the support we've had from so many places that people are really taking this as their own campaign, as something that's important to them, not because we are organizing things on specific days. So that's beautiful, obviously. So, yeah, we called this Day of Action about 2 days before, which is obviously no time at all to organise anything. I think there was a few things outside different embassies, actually. Some in the Philippines, maybe in Boston. I'll get the proper update later on. But yes, I think it's more organic than that people are just organising things in their own way, on their own time, because, of course, everywhere has different times and ways of doing things. But I just think generally that international solidarity is constant and ongoing and escalating over time as well, which is really an amazing thing. And again, gives a lot of strength to the people on hunger strike. As for the British government, as expected, no response from them. It's no great surprise to us. And in fact, when we gave our demands to the British state. We weren't expecting a response from them. What we were expecting and what is happening is that the people are mobilizing to pressure them from the grassroots up. And that's how we will get our demands. What's been very interesting to see in the last few days is we got a couple of letters from left-wing kind of independent MPs demanding that the government responds. But to me, the most interesting thing is just a couple of days ago, the district council in Derry, which is on the border between the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and has been a historical place of conflict for that reason, passed a motion to support the hunger strikers, to oppose the proscription of Palestine Action, and to send a cross-party delegation to meet with the prisoners' representatives and their families. So this means now that this motion will be passed to every single local council in the country, in the UK, as they call it. And now we can start pressuring those local councils to debate this and to pass it. So this is the reaction that we've had from the British state, which interestingly enough comes from those dissidents that were ex-hunger strikers and now have those positions within the institutions. So even despite it coming from an institution, really, it's coming from the people.
So the first trial group, as I understand, of the Filton case began this week. What is that looking like, and what support are you seeing?
It's been quite interesting. It's not a coincidence, that the prosecution in this case asked for the trial to start specifically at the same time as the legal challenge to the proscription. Why is that? Because once again, they can come out and slander all the defendants in the mainstream media, accuse them of being violent, and therefore at the same time try to discredit the legal challenge into the proscription. It seems like that's not been very effective from their side. We shall wait and see. But yeah, like I said, it's obvious to everybody that there's not going to be a fair trial at all. It's obvious to us that they're trying to stitch us up on all fronts. That's why they changed the judge at the last minute on the legal challenge to the prescription from a judge called Judge Chamberlain, who's known to be very fair and impartial, to a panel of 3 judges. 2 of them have well-known links to Zionism, funding right-wing political parties, etc. So the results of that won't be known for another month or 2 at least, I think. But as usual, as anyone who's been through the so-called justice system will tell you, we don't have faith in these courts, in these legal systems, because it's the same people that run them, the ones that are friends with the people who run the arms factories, the ones that put people in prison in the first place. So we have to do things our own way and not take for granted that we'll get any justice from the courts. The Filton campaign has been hugely successful, continues to be hugely successful, and we work alongside them. Obviously, as some of the Filton 24 are also on hunger strike, they have people mobilising outside court every week. They have mass support. Now they've had a year to organise this campaign. The name Filton 24 is on everybody's lips up and down the country. So a great example of how to run a successful campaign, I think, and run with the friends and the family of the prisoners front and centre, which is an amazing thing, really.
So how can people learn more about the cases and offer solidarity with the 6 and with the wider trial group? And where are some good places that they can keep up on what's going on?
Mm-hmm. So we have the Filton 24 social media on Instagram. We also have the Prisoners for Palestine social media. So, of course, they have a different focus. The Filton 24 page is more focused on the trial at the moment, and Prisoners for Palestine is more focused on the hunger strike. We also have a website. So for people that don't use social media, everything is on there, all the news and updates and call outs when we have specific actions that need doing. Of course, it's different being in another country, different ways to support not being in Britain. One thing that everyone can do, and I think this is a great help, not just for the morale of the prisoners, but also to break through this prison censorship that's one of the demands, is to write letters to the prisoners. It's a really nice thing to do, especially if you do it in your community. Lots of people do community events where you all write letters together. You know, it may cost a little bit more, the postage from over there, but it's well worth doing. what we're also focusing on is pressuring British embassies and consulates from different countries. So when they see that this campaign has international support, it really freaks them out because they can see that this is not just a small group of people over here making a fuss about nothing. So I can give you an example. Our comrade T is on hunger strike right now. She actually did a hunger strike back in August as well. So incredible to see the strength behind that. At certain points during that hunger strike, we did call outs for phone blockades to the prison. And the fact that there were people calling with different accents from different countries during that phone blockade really scared the prison administration, as in, why are there people calling from different countries about you? Why are you so popular? So this means that these kind of actions are much more effective, actually. These kind of call outs, we don't say bring the prison all the time. It's much more effective when it's targeted. So it's just a case of checking out our website or our social media and keeping an eye on that. And the visibility thing is really, really important. There's no point in doing a hunger strike if nobody hears about it. So just telling everybody in your local community about what's going on. We have lots of resources on our website that people can use to print out and share. So there's really lots of different things that people can do depending on what their inclination is and how much time they have available and where they are as well. Because, of course, there's not a consulate or an embassy in every town.
Yeah. And of note, I think also as far as international solidarity that was offered during the earlier hunger strike that T was running, at least Casey Goonan and Malik Mohammed are two prisoners that I'm familiar with, two anarchist prisoners in the U.S. who participated in solidarity, took their own hunger strike and announced it through their support committees, which is really inspiring.
Absolutely. And currently there is an Italian anarchist prisoner, Stecco, who's on solidarity hunger strike as well. And it's just been passed to us today, the information that there's also a Greek prisoner who started a solidarity hunger strike. So, yeah, it's quite incredible to see the amount of solidarity. And I think there's, as time goes on, we're only seeing more and more of this. So really, really beautiful to see how people can make those connections across borders and across prison walls as well.
Yeah. And this is such an international issue that affects so many people in so many places, right? As you pointed to throughout this interview, as is pointed to by these prisoners showing solidarity or people calling in. And you also pointed that you're experiencing things by the British government that seem reflective of tendencies of repression happening in the so-called US. And so I wonder if, in closing, you have any sort of insights from the outside of seeing the application of counterterrorism legal frameworks and tools currently in the U.S. being applied against quote-unquote Antifa, but in particular the case of the Prairie Land defendants. I wonder if you could talk about how these states are reacting to opposition to an increasingly violent fascism at home and imperialism abroad in both of these circumstances, what we can maybe teach each other on either side of this ocean.
I think it's a case of looking at the bigger picture, right? We can often get lost in our day-to-day campaigning because there's so much to do and there's so much going on, right? But this is something that to me is so important that we learn from the prisoners. And this is why they're the locus of our struggle, that when you're in a place like that, it does give you a different perspective and a different vision. Just the fact that you do have all this time to sit and contemplate and understand things in a different way. Just the fact that you are face to face with your oppressors every day. And this is something that I've experienced as well. You just become so focused and you just have a different analysis of everything. And that's really easily lost on the outside world. So to take our cues from them, I think, is the key here. And what they show us is that this is all connected. The prison industrial complex is connected to the military industrial complex. Colonialism is international. And so the resistance to that must be international as well. The fact that someone in Italy or in Greece can go on hunger strike in solidarity with someone in Britain, despite having never even spoken to them, that's international solidarity. That is a beautiful thing. And what we can see now is take a step back. We can see the beginning of the end of colonialism, of capitalism. I think it was Gramsci that said, the old world is dying, a new one struggles to be born, and now is the time of monsters. So I think it's clear to a lot of people, the Israeli state is in a death spiral. It probably won't exist in a few years. So it's up to us in the meantime to keep fighting to make sure that actually becomes a reality. And I think the same with colonialism, the same with capitalism. And what's going to be born out of that afterwards, that's what we have to decide, and that's what we have to work for.
That's a lovely place to end it. Francesca, thank you very much for having this conversation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's great to talk to you.
If you want to support The Final Straw Radio, you can subscribe to our podcast via various streaming platforms, follow, rate, and share our materials online, and learn more at tfsr.media. And if you'd like to fund our transcription work that allows for easier translation, more accessibility of content, and the zines that we produce for each interview, consider picking up some merch from us or making a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal, Stripe, Venmo, or LibrePay. Or joining our Patreon to access early release content and other goodies via the links that you can find at tfsr.media/support. Finally, if you'd like to hear us on your local radio station, visit tfsr.media/radio to find more info or reach out to us for some help. Thanks for listening. The Final Straw Radio is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
The Frontline Herbalism Podcast is a show for people who love plants and care about liberation. Plant knowledge, medicine-making tips, interviews, and advice on how to skill up to strengthen collective autonomy, self-defense, and resilience to climate change, capitalism, and state violence. Find the podcast at solidarity.apothecary.org/podcast.
This is The Final Straw Radio. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at TFSR, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. Programming support is brought to you by Firestorm Books, located at 1022 Haywood Road in West Asheville. Firestorm is a bookstore and social movement space owned by its workers, in operation since 2008. Their event calendar and complete catalog of books can be found online at firestorm.coop.